We embark beside the Giudecca Canal, and first we cross to Giudecca Island. A small cruise ship, soon to set off down the coast of Croatia. We show that trip in another production. The waterbus has seats like a bus, but the view's better from outside. It seems Giudecca Island has space for a line of trees. This must be the newest of the Lido Island ferries. There go the police. The almost deserted cargo port beside the old city has been upstaged by a newer and larger port over on the mainland. The new port and industrial zone are about 4 kilometers away on the mainland. The Lido Island ferry is turning to berth at the end of Tronchetto Island. Sand dredged from the lagoon in the 1970s was formed into Tronchetto Island, the main car park of Venice. On our right is an open area where goods are transferred from lorries to small boats for delivery to addresses in the old city. The old city of islands is linked by road and by rail to the mainland by these 2.5-mile, 4-kilometer bridges. The railway reached Venice as early as 1847, but the road bridge wasn't opened until 1932. Only emergency boats, this is an ambulance, are allowed to go so fast. Even so, the powerful wash can damage the ancient foundations of the buildings. We now approach the busiest waterbus stop. This is where those arriving by car, bus or coach must transfer to water transport, unless they are to walk through the often tortuous maze which is the pedestrian streets of Venice. Roma is served by no less than 10 waterbus services, so there are several stops and waiting shelters. The waterbus operators' offices are close by. There goes our driver at the end of his turn of duty.
Prossima fermata, Ferrovia. Next stop, railway station.
Around this bend lies the start of the world-renowned Grand Canal. This is Santa Lucia railway station. The name commemorates the church demolished to provide the space. As Venice has about 120 churches, one supposes they could afford to sacrifice one to the Iron Horse. The station was rebuilt in 1955. This, the Scalzi Bridge, is one of only 3 across the Grand Canal. Built in 1934, it's named for the adjacent church of the Carmelites, whose monks wore sandals. Scalzi means shoeless. The history of the Republic of Venice started about 450 AD. The collapse of the Roman Empire had been followed by perpetual strife. Refugees from this settled on marshy islands in a lagoon at the head of the Adriatic. From this safe and strategic position, Venetians later sallied forth, establishing trade and trading centres way down the Adriatic and into the Med. Venetian merchants became very prosperous. The main route to the northern lagoon, used by several waterbus routes to the islands of Murano and Murano and to the airport. Waterbus Service 1 calls at every one of the many stops along the Grand Canal, but our number 82 is something of an express. It misses many of them. The historic buildings are supported on a forest of timber piles driven into a layer of hard clay. This, the Turkish merchant's warehouse of the 17th century, is now a natural history museum. This palace houses the municipal casino in the winter. In summer, it follows the moneyed Lido Island. The first white 17th century palace now contains museums of modern and oriental art. Once a gilded facade and home of 8 governing doges from the Contani family. While this palace is being extensively restored, its windows are artfully depicted on the temporary covering. The green spoil-hopper barge is probably the largest craft to use the Grand Canal. Everyone who wanted to be thought important had to have a palace. So many palaces, they can't all be properly maintained. The fruit and veg market has finished for the day. The gondola is said to date from the 11th century. Handmade, they must be painted black and are ferociously expensive to hire. Most Venetians have never been in one. This 500-year-old building was the German Trade Center. It now houses the city's central post office. The Venetians call their water buses vaporetti, literally steamers. There's an emphasis on historic romanticism round here. The stone Rialto Bridge was built between 1588 and 1591. There are 2 rows of shops on each ramp. The only bridge over the Grand Canal until the 19th century. It was heavily restored in 1977. Rialto is certainly a tourist hotspot for the gondolieri.
Prossima fermata, San Tomà. Next stop, San Tomà.
The Venetian businessman in a hurry would take a taxi. We're overtaking one now. These two white 13th century palaces now house the offices of the Mayor of Venice. Only the number one stop here at San Silvestro. A tourist group spread over 3 gondolas. The imposing Palazzo Grimani now contains the appeal court. Built in the 16th century for a family of jewelers, this palace is now used by the university. Again a number one, drawing into San Angelo. Is it unlawful to use a mobile phone while controlling a motorboat? This is one of 6 gondola ferries, rowed by 2 men. These reasonably priced services are used by the ordinary Venetian. Rio Foscari is the start of a shortcut to the rail station. More restoration work to combat the effects of the centuries.
Prossima fermata, San Samuele. Next stop, San Samuele. Prossima fermata, Accademia. Next stop, Accademia.
The timber Accademia Bridge, intended to be temporary, was built in the 1930s and replaced like for like 50 years later. Candy-striped mooring posts or palina show their owners' colours. Just like today's London buses, the Venice waterbus has two-way radio. A grand address for local administrative offices. The basilica was built in gratitude for the ending of the Great Plague of 1630. Behind the buildings is the 315-foot campanile or bell tower of St. Mark's Basilica. Just visible to the right of the bell tower are some of the 5 domes of St. Mark's Basilica. To the right of the trees are the Zecca or Mint, then the Marciana Library and the darker bulk of the Doge's Palace. On our right, the full width of the Giudecca Canal has opened up. The Lido Island ferry is about to conceal the church of S.GIORGIO Maggiore on the island of the same name. We now approach the end of the 82's route. This next stop for St. Mark's Square. If you wish to see the square, why not visit Venice for yourself?